She had a net worth of $400 million, a closet full of designer clothes, and a heart that was slowly freezing over. Serafina Sterling could buy anything on earth except the one thing she desperately needed: a father for her 7-year-old daughter. Tired of gold diggers and fake smiles, she did the unthinkable. She handed the decision to her daughter, Lily. "You choose, darling. Anyone you want." She expected Lily to pick a prince, a celebrity, or a tycoon. She never expected her to point a finger at a man covered in grease, holding a wrench with a tragic secret buried in his eyes. This is the story of how a broken millionaire and a lonely mechanic found love in the wreckage. The boardroom of Sterling Industries was silent, save for the rhythmic tapping of Serafina Sterling's manicured fingernail against the mahogany table. At 32, Serafina was a force of nature. She had taken her father's failing textile mill and spun it into a global fashion and tech empire. She was feared, she was respected, and she was profoundly exhausted. "The board is concerned, Serafina," implied Walter Thorne, a man who had been old when Serafina was in diapers. He adjusted his glasses, the light reflecting off the lenses obscuring his eyes. "The takeover bid from Kincaid Corp is aggressive. They are using your single status as a weapon. They claim the company lacks familial stability. It's archaic, I know, but the shareholders are skittish." Serafina stood up, smoothing the skirt of her Chanel suit. "Let them be skittish, Walter. My numbers speak for themselves. Revenue is up 40%. "It's not about numbers anymore." Walter sighed, sliding a dossier across the table. "It's about image. Kincaid is presenting himself as a family man. You are presented as the Ice Queen. You need a partner, Serafina, by the end of the fiscal year, or the board might just vote you out." Serafina walked out of the skyscraper and into the back of her waiting limousine, feeling the air leave her lungs. She didn't want a husband. She had tried that once years ago with Lily's father, a man who loved her bank account more than he loved her, and who had vanished the moment the prenup talk began. When she arrived at her estate in the Hamptons, the silence of the house hit her harder than the noise of the city. It was a palace, truly. 12 bedrooms, a pool that rivaled a resort, and enough marble to build a monument. But it was cold. "Mommy." The only warmth in Serafina's life came barreling down the grand staircase. Lily, 7 years old, with wild curls and eyes that saw too much. Serafina dropped to her knees, disregarding the cost of her stockings, and caught her daughter. "Hey, Bug," Serafina whispered, burying her face in Lily's hair. "How was school?" "Boring. Everyone talks about their dads," Lily said, pulling back. The innocence in her voice was like a knife. "Chloe's dad took her to the zoo. Mason's dad fixed his bike. Who's going to fix my bike?" Serafina's heart clenched. "I can hire someone to fix your bike, Lily. I can hire the best bike fixer in the world." "I don't want a hired one." Lily stomped her foot, a flash of Serafina's own fire in her eyes. "I want a real one." That night, after reading Lily 3 bedtime stories, Serafina retreated to her study with a glass of Pinot Noir. She looked at the dossier Walter had given her. It was a list of suitable matches. Pre-vetted men, aristocrats, other CEOs, a duke from a small European country. She hated them all. They were sharks in suits just like her ex. An idea reckless and desperate formed in her mind. If she couldn't trust her own judgment, which had failed her before, maybe she should trust the only person whose intuition was still pure. The next morning, over a breakfast of imported fruit and croissants, Serafina pushed the photos away. "Lily," she started, her voice trembling slightly. You know how you said you wanted a dad? Lily stopped chewing, her eyes widening. Well, Serafina continued, I'm going to let you pick. Pick? Lily asked. Like at the pet store? Sort of. We are going to meet some people, and if you feel like one of them is the right one, you tell me, and I'll give him a chance. It was a disaster waiting to happen. Serafina knew it. But as she looked at her daughter's hopeful face, she realized she would risk her empire for that smile. She just hoped Lily had better taste in men than she did. The interviews, as Serafina privately called them, were excruciating. Over the next 2 weeks, Serafina arranged casual meetups with the men from Walter's list. She took Lily to a polo match to meet Lord Benedict. Benedict ignored Lily entirely, spending 20 minutes talking about his thoroughbred's bloodline, while Lily kicked at the dirt. He smells like old cheese, Lily whispered loudly. Strike one. Then there was Carter Sterling, no relation, a tech billionaire from Silicon Valley. They met for lunch at a Michelin star restaurant. Carter spent the entire time on his phone checking stocks. When Lily asked him to pass the salt, he handed her a napkin without looking up. He's a robot, Mommy, Lily declared in the car. Strike two. The final straw was Harrison Blake. Harrison was perfect on the paper. Ivy League, educated, handsome, charming, and heavily favored by Serafina's board. He took them on his private yacht. He bought Lily a diamond bracelet, a ridiculous gift for a 7-year-old. Do you like it, Princess? Harrison asked, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It scratches, Lily said, taking it off. Can we go fishing? Fishing is dirty. Harrison laughed, patting her head like she was a dog. We don't do dirty, do we, Serafina? Serafina saw the look on Lily's face. It wasn't just dislike, it was shrinking. Harrison made Lily feel small. We're leaving, Serafina said, standing up. Sarah, don't be dramatic. Harrison scoffed. The merger depends on... I said we are leaving. Driving back to the city in her vintage Aston Martin, her one indulgence that wasn't strictly practical, Serafina was fuming. The pressure from the board was mounting. She had 1 week left before the shareholder meeting. If she didn't announce an engagement or a serious partnership, the vote of no confidence would go through. She would lose the company she built from nothing. I hate them, Lily said from the passenger seat, crossing her arms. They are all fake, like plastic dolls. I know, baby. I know. Serafina sighed, gripping the leather steering wheel tight. Maybe it's just us against the world. Suddenly the car gave a violent shudder. A loud clunk echoed from the engine, and steam began to hiss from the hood. The power steering locked up. Damn it! Serafina cursed, wrestling the heavy car to the side of the road. They had drifted off the main highway to avoid traffic, and were now in a gritty industrial part of Queens. The sun was setting, casting long, jagged shadows across the peeling paint of warehouses and chain-link fences. This was not Serafina's world. She tried to restart the engine. Nothing but a pathetic wheeze. She pulled out her phone. No service. Are we stuck? Lily asked, her voice trembling. No, we're just pausing, Serafina lied. She looked out the window and saw a flickering neon sign about a block away, Reynolds Auto and Repair. Come on, Serafina said, grabbing her Hermes bag and Lily's hand. We're going on an adventure. They walked towards the garage. It was an old brick building. The bay doors rolled up to reveal the dark maw of the shop. Rap music was playing softly from a radio. A German shepherd was sleeping by the door. Serafina stepped inside her high heels, clicking loudly on the oil-stained concrete. The smell of grease, old rubber, and coffee hit her. It was visceral and real. "Hello," she called out, using her CEO voice. "I require assistance." A pair of legs sticking out from under a 1969 Ford Mustang slid out on a creeper. The man who stood up was not wearing a suit. He was wearing a navy blue jumpsuit tied at the waist, a white t-shirt stained with oil clinging to his chest. He was tall with broad shoulders and messy dark hair that looked like it hadn't seen a comb in days. He wiped his hands on a rag, leaving streaks of grease on his forearms. He looked at Serafina, then at Lily, then at the Aston Martin visible down the road. He didn't smile. He didn't fawn. He didn't recognize her from the cover of Forbes. "Shop's closed, lady," he said, his voice raspy, like gravel crunching under tires. "My car broke down," Serafina said, irritated by his dismissal. "I will pay you double your hourly rate if you look at it now." The man his name tag read. Jack narrowed his eyes. "I don't care about your money. I got to pick up my kid in 20 minutes. Call a tow truck." "I can't." Serafina snapped, her composure slipping. "I have no signal, and I'm not standing on a street corner in the dark with my daughter." Jack looked at Lily. Lily was staring at the German shepherd who had lifted its head. "Is he friendly?" Lily asked the man, ignoring the tension. Jack's face changed. The hardness around his eyes softened instantly. "Yeah. That's Buster. He looks tough, but he's a marshmallow. You can pet him." Lily walked over and buried her hands in the dog's fur. Buster licked her face. Lily giggled a sound Serafina hadn't heard in weeks. Jack sighed, tossing the rag onto a workbench. "All right, bring the car around. I'll take a look, but only because of the kid." Serafina bristled, but nodded. She wasn't used to charity, and she certainly wasn't used to men who didn't care about her wallet. Jack walked out to the car with her, popped the hood, and stared at the engine. He didn't use a diagnostic computer. He just listened, touched a hose, and twisted a valve. "Radiator hose blew," Jack said flatly. "And your alternator is shot. British cars." He shook his head. "Pretty to look at pain in the arse to keep running. Can you fix it?" "Not tonight. Need parts. You're stranded." Serafina felt panic rising. I need to get back to Manhattan." "Look," Jack said, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. "I'm going to pick up my son from daycare down the street. Then I'm coming back here to close up. I can drop you at the train station on my way. It's the best I can do." Serafina hesitated. Getting into a stranger's truck. It went against every security protocol she had. But looking at Jack, she saw something. His hands were dirty, but his nails were trimmed. His jumpsuit was stained, but his boots were polished. There was a precision to him, a competence. "Fine," Serafina said. When Jack returned 10 minutes later, a small boy was riding on his shoulders. The boy about 6 had messy hair, just like his dad, and was holding a toy wrench. "This is Leo," Jack said, lifting the boy down gently. "Leo, this is—" He looked at Serafina, waiting for a name. "Serafina," she said. "And I'm Lily," Lily chirped from where she was still petting the dog. "Hi, Lily," Leo said shyly. "Do you like Lego?" "I love Lego," Lily shouted. "I have a spaceship in the office," Leo whispered conspiratorially. Before Serafina could object, Lily and Leo ran into the small glass-walled office at the back of the garage. Serafina stood alone with Jack in the middle of the shop. The silence stretched between them, heavy and charged. "You're not from around here, Serafina," Jack said, leaning against the workbench. It wasn't a question. "No, I'm not." "Well," Jack said, locking eyes with her, "welcome to the real world." For the first time in years, Serafina Sterling felt completely out of control, and terrifyingly she didn't hate it. The sky over Queens didn't just open up, it tore apart. Within minutes of Lily and Leo disappearing into the office, a torrential downpour hammered the metal roof of Reynolds Auto and Repair. It was a deafening industrial drum solo that drowned out the hum of the city. Jack walked to the bay door and pulled the chain to rattle it shut, locking out the storm. He turned back to Serafina, who was shivering slightly in the drafty garage. "Trains are down," Jack said, checking his cracked iPhone. "Flash flooding on the tracks near Woodside. You're not going anywhere for a few hours." Serafina hugged her arms around her chest. "I need to call a car service. I can't stay here." "Lady, look outside." Jack pointed a grease-stained finger at the window. The street was turning into a river. "Unless your Uber is a boat, you're stuck. Come on, I have a space heater in the office." Defeated by the elements, Serafina followed him. The office was small, cluttered, and warm. It smelled of stale coffee and cedar. The walls were covered in children's drawings, stick figures holding wrenches, crooked cars, and a superhero that looked suspiciously like Jack. Lily and Leo were on the floor, surrounded by a mountain of Legos. "Mum, look!" Lily shouted, holding up a multicolored monstrosity. "It's a castle for Buster." The German shepherd was asleep under the desk, twitching in his dreams. "It's beautiful, Bug," Serafina said, her voice softening. She looked for a place to sit. The only options were a swivel chair with duct tape on the armrest or a plastic stool. She chose the stool, careful not to snag her stockings. "I usually order pizza on Tuesdays," Jack said, opening a mini fridge and tossing a juice box to Leo. He held one out to Lily. She took it like it was holy water. "You want in? It's not Michelin star, but it's hot." I don't eat gluten," Serafina began, then saw the look on Jack's face. It was a look of pure, unadulterated amusement. "It's New York pizza," Jack deadpanned. "The grease kills the gluten. Pepperoni or plain," Serafina looked at Lily, who was already begging with her eyes. "Pepperoni, fine." An hour later, the billionaire CEO of Sterling Industries was sitting on a plastic stool, eating a slice of greasy pepperoni pizza on a paper plate while a mechanic wiped tomato sauce off her daughter's face. "So," Jack said, leaning back in his chair, boots up on the desk, "what do you do, Serafina?" "Besides driving fancy cars you can't fix. I run a company," she said, defensive. "Textiles, technology. We specialize in sustainable synthetic fibers." "Sounds fancy," Jack said. "Does it make you happy?" The question caught her off guard. "It makes me money. It creates jobs. Happiness is irrelevant to the bottom line." Jack laughed, a low rumble of a sound. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. I spend all day covered in other people's dirt fixing things they broke. My back hurts. My knuckles are always bleeding and I'm barely scraping by. But when I come in here and see Leo, I'm happy." Serafina looked at him. Really looked at him. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, she saw the lines of exhaustion around his eyes. He wasn't handsome in the polished way the men on Walter's list were. He was rugged. Dangerous, maybe. But when he looked at his son, his face was open and vulnerable. "Where is Leo's mother?" Serafina asked the question, slipping out before she could stop it. The air in the room changed instantly. The warmth evaporated. Jack put his pizza slice down. "She died," he said, his voice flat. 3 years ago. Aneurysm. She was 28. "I'm so sorry," Serafina whispered. Lily stopped playing with the Legos, sensing the shift. "Yeah. Well?" Jack stood up abruptly, moving to the window to check the rain. "Life kicks you in the teeth sometimes. You just gotta keep chewing." He turned back, and for a second, their eyes locked. Serafina saw a depth of pain there that mirrored her own loneliness. She saw a man who had built a fortress around his heart, just like she had. But his fortress was built to protect his son, while hers was built to protect her assets. "My dad left," Lily piped up suddenly. Serafina froze. "He didn't die," Lily continued, fitting a red block onto her tower. "He just liked his new girlfriend better. She has a pool." Jack looked from Lily to Serafina. His gaze hardened. He clearly assumed Serafina was just another socialite whose husband had traded her in for a newer model. He didn't know she was the shark who had eaten the husband alive in court. "His loss, kid," Jack said to Lily, winking. "You're pretty cool. You know the difference between a wrench and a ratchet." "I do," Lily beamed. "Sure, I'll teach you." For the next 2 hours while the storm raged, Jack didn't talk about stocks. He didn't try to impress Serafina. He sat on the floor with the kids and showed Lily how a differential worked using Lego gears. He was patient. He was kind. He listened when Lily spoke. Serafina watched a strange ache spreading in her chest. This was it. This was what money couldn't buy. By 9 p.m. the rain had slowed to a drizzle. Leo was asleep on the small office couch. Lily was yawning, her head resting on Serafina's lap. "I can take you home now," Jack said quietly, grabbing a set of keys. "Not in the Aston. It's dead. I'll take the shop truck." "You don't have to. I'm not letting you take a cab to the Hamptons or wherever you live at this hour. Get the kid." The ride to Serafina's Manhattan penthouse was quiet. Lily was fast asleep in the back seat of Jack's battered Ford F-150. The truck smelled of pine air freshener and old leather. It rattled when it hit potholes, a stark contrast to the smooth silence of Serafina's limo. When they pulled up to the curb of the Sterling Tower on Fifth Avenue, the doorman, a man named Higgins, who usually bowed to Serafina, stepped out with a look of horror. He eyed the rusty truck like it was a contagious disease. "Ms. Sterling," Higgins asked, opening the truck door with white-gloved hands. Is everything all right?" "Everything is fine, Higgins," Serafina said, stepping out. She turned to Jack. Jack stayed in the driver's seat, his arm resting on the open window. He looked up at the glass skyscraper that bore her last name in gold letters above the entrance. He looked at the doorman. Then he looked at Serafina. The realization hit him. "Sterling," Jack muttered, shaking his head. "Serafina Sterling, the Sterling Industries." "Yes," she said, feeling strangely ashamed of her wealth for the first time. "I charged you for the pizza." Jack laughed bitterly. "I should have charged you for the air you breathed in my shop." "Jack, wait." "Thanks for the adventure, lady," Jack said, putting the truck in gear. "Don't worry about the Aston. I'll have it towed to the dealer tomorrow. You stick to your tower. I'll stick to my garage." He drove off before she could say thank you. The next morning, the reality of her life crashed back in. Serafina sat in her corner office, overlooking the city. Walter Thorne was pacing in front of her desk. "Kincaid has raised his offer," Walter said, sweat beading on his forehead. "The board is meeting on Friday. That is 3 days away, Serafina. 3 days, unless you walk into that room with a fiancé who screams stability and family values. They are going to vote you out as CEO. They'll replace you with Kincaid's puppet. I built this company, Serafina growled, snapping a pencil in half. And you will lose it. Walter slammed his hand on the desk. Because you are stubborn. Just pick one of the men, Serafina Harrison. Blake is calling every hour. Harrison, Blake is a snake. He's a snake with a wedding ring. That's all we need. Serafina closed her eyes. She thought of Harrison Blake's cold smile. Then unbidden an image flashed in her mind. A man in a grease-stained jumpsuit, sitting on the floor explaining gear ratios to her daughter. A man who bought cheap pizza and loved his son more than life itself. Mummy. Serafina opened her eyes. Lily was standing in the doorway of the office holding her backpack. What is it? Lily. You asked me to pick, Lily said softly. Pick what? The new dad. You said I could pick. Serafina's breath caught. I did. I pick Jack, Lily said firmly. Lily, Jack is... He's not like us. He's a mechanic. He fixed my Lego castle, Lily said. And he didn't look at his phone when I talked. And he has a dog. I pick Jack. Serafina stared at her daughter. It was insane. It was illogical. It was social suicide. It was perfect. Walter, Serafina said, standing up and grabbing her coat. Cancel my meetings. Where are you going? Walter sputtered. To negotiate a merger. Serafina didn't take the limo. She took a taxi to Queens. When she walked into Reynolds Auto and Repair, Jack was under a Honda Civic. We're closed for lunch, he shouted from underneath. I'm not here for an oil change, Serafina said. Jack slid out. When he saw her, he wiped his hands and stood up, crossing his arms. Coming to slum it again, princess, or did you forget your purse? I have a business proposition for you, Serafina said, cutting to the chase. She needed to be in control. This was a deal. She was good at deals. I'm listening, Jack said, though he looked ready to kick her out. I need a husband, she said. Jack blinked. Excuse me. Technically, I need a fiancé first, then a husband, for 6 months, maybe a year. Jack started laughing. He turned his back on her and walked toward his toolbox. You're crazy. Get out of my shop. I will pay you, Serafina said, her voice rising. $500,000. Cash. Jack stopped. His back stiffened. He turned around slowly. What did you say, Maul? $500,000, Serafina repeated, stepping closer. All you have to do is wear a suit, attend some events, smile at my shareholders, and pretend to be in love with me. We get married, we stay married for a year to stabilize my company's stock, and then we divorce quietly. You get the money. I keep my company. You think you can buy people? Jack asked, his voice low and dangerous. I think everyone has a price, Serafina said, though her confidence was wavering under his intense stare. You have a son. You have this place. I looked up the property records, Jack. The bank is foreclosing on this garage in 2 months. You're 3 payments behind on your mortgage. You're drowning. Jack flinched, as if she'd slapped him. You looked into my life. I do my due diligence. You're going to lose the shop. You're going to lose your home. And then where will Leo live? Jack walked up to her, invading her personal space. He smelled of engine oil and fury. He towered over her. I should throw you out of here, he whispered. But you won't. Serafina held her ground, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. Because you love Leo, and $500,000 secures his future. It sends him to college. It saves this garage. Jack stared at her, his jaw clenched tight enough to break a tooth. He looked around the shop, his father's shop. He thought about the foreclosure notice tucked in his top drawer. He thought about Leo wearing hand-me-down sneakers. $1 million, Jack said. Serafina didn't blink. Done. And, Jack pointed a finger at her nose, I'm not your employee. I'm your husband. That means in public you treat me with respect. You don't talk down to me. And we do this my way. No scripts. Agreed. And Lily. Jack added his voice, softening just a fraction. She can't know it's a contract. I won't lie to that little girl. As far as she knows, we're trying. Serafina nodded. That is acceptable. Jack wiped his hand on his jumpsuit and held it out. It was rough, calloused, and stained black. Deal, Mrs. Sterling. Serafina hesitated, then reached out her manicured hand and shook it, and shook. His grip was strong and warm. Deal, Mr. Reynolds. Good. Jack released her hand. Now get out. I have work to do. Pick me up at 7, and bring a suit. I don't own one. As Serafina walked out of the garage, she felt a strange thrill. She had just bought a husband. But as she looked at her hand, she could still feel the phantom warmth of his touch. She had a feeling Jack Reynolds was going to be the most difficult investment she had ever made. The fitting was a war zone. Serafina had hired an Italian tailor, a man named Giovanni, who usually dressed royalty, to come to the penthouse. Jack stood on a velvet podium in the middle of the living room, looking like a trapped animal. Arms up, please, Giovanni commanded, measuring tape flying. This thing itches, Jack grumbled, tugging at the collar of the crisp white dress shirt. And these pants are tight. If I drop a wrench, I'm splitting a seam. You won't be dropping wrenches, Mr. Reynolds, Serafina said. She was sitting on a chaise lounge, reviewing talking points on her tablet. She didn't look up, but her foot was tapping nervously. You will be holding champagne flutes and shaking hands, and please try to look like you haven't just crawled out from under a chassis. Jack shot her a glare. I look like a penguin. Giovanni stepped back. He looks magnificent, Signora. Serafina finally looked up. She froze. Jack Reynolds cleaned up well, terrifyingly well. The midnight blue tuxedo, tailored to within a millimeter of perfection, accentuated his broad shoulders and lean, muscular build. The scruff on his jaw had been trimmed to a deliberate, rugged stubble. With his dark hair combed back and his intense, brooding eyes, he didn't look like a mechanic from Queens. He looked like an old-school Hollywood movie star. A dangerous one. It will do, Serafina said, her voice sounding a little breathless. She cleared her throat, regaining her composure. We leave in 20 minutes. The gala is at the Metropolitan Museum. Every shareholder, every rival, and every gossip columnist in New York will be there. Do not speak unless spoken to. And if they ask about your background— I lie, Jack asked, stepping off the podium. You embellish. You are a consultant in automotive restoration. You deal in vintage assets. Right. Fancy talk for I fix old cars. The ride to the museum was tense. Lily and Leo were staying at the penthouse with Serafina's nanny, a stern woman named Mrs. Higgins, no relation to the doorman, though equally terrifying. When the limo pulled up to the red carpet, flashbulbs erupted like a lightning storm. Serafina put on her armor, a cold, dazzling smile. She turned to Jack. Ready to earn your paycheck? Jack took a deep breath, checked his cufflinks, and offered her his arm. "Let's get this over with." They stepped out. The noise was deafening. Reporters screamed Serafina's name. Then the whispers started. "Who is he?" "Look at him." "Is that the mystery man?" Jack navigated the crowd with surprising grace. He was physically imposing, which created a natural bubble of space around Serafina. He didn't cower. He glared back at the cameras with a protective intensity that the tabloids would later call smoldering. Inside the Temple of Dendur, the atmosphere was stifling. Waiters circulated with caviar. The air smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. "Serafina." A booming voice cut through the crowd. It was Harrison Blake. He was wearing a white tuxedo jacket that made him look like a bartender. He approached them, a glass of scotch in his hand, his eyes scanning Jack with predatory amusement. "Harrison?" Serafina nodded coolly. "I heard rumors you'd brought a date." Harrison smirked, stepping too close. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with it. Who is this one of your security guards?" Serafina opened her mouth to recite the rehearsed cover story, but Jack beat her to it. "Jack Reynolds," Jack said, extending a hand. He didn't use the weak socialite grip Harrison expected. He squeezed Harrison's hand with the grip strength of a man who wrestled rusted lug nuts for a living. Harrison winced, his knees buckling slightly. "Charmed," Harrison squeaked, pulling his hand away and massaging his knuckles. "And what, sector are you in, Mr. Reynolds?" "Vintage restoration," Jack said smoothly, his voice dropping an octave. "I specialize in taking broken, neglected things and making them run better than new. It requires patience and a firm hand." He looked directly at Serafina when he said it. A flush rose on her neck. "Fascinating," Harrison sneered, trying to recover. "I suppose that's quaint. But we're talking high finance tonight. The Kincaid merger. Complex derivatives. I'm sure it's over your head." Suddenly, an older man with a cane hobbled over. It was Arthur Sterling, Serafina's great-uncle and the largest individual shareholder. He was the one man Serafina feared. "Serafina," Arthur grunted, "and this must be the young man." "Uncle Arthur," Serafina said, her hands trembling slightly. "This is Jack." Arthur peered at Jack through thick spectacles. "Do you golf, son?" "No, sir," Jack said. Serafina closed her eyes. "Strike one." "Good." Arthur banged his cane on the floor. "Hate the game. Waste of good walking time. What do you drive?" "Currently a 1969 Ford F-150, but I'm rebuilding a 67 Shelby GT 500 in my spare time. The intake manifold is giving me hell, but the block is original." Arthur's eyes lit up. "A GT 500, the 428 Cobra jet engine. Yes, sir. Police interceptor package." "My God," Arthur breathed, grabbing Jack's arm. "I had one of those, before the arthritis. Best car I ever owned. Tell me, how are you handling the suspension tuning? The understeer on those beasts was lethal." Serafina watched in shock as Jack and the most powerful man in the room launched into a 30-minute passionate discussion about carburetors torque and leaf springs. Harrison Blake tried to interject with talk about stock options, but Arthur waved him away like a fly. "Quiet, Harrison. The man is talking about horsepower." By the end of the night, Jack wasn't just tolerated, he was a hit. The older male board members, bored to tears by finance talk, flocked to him to talk about their vintage car collections. Jack charmed the wives by actually listening to them instead of staring past them. As they walked out of the gala, Arthur Sterling patted Serafina on the shoulder. "He's solid, Sarah. Good grip. Dirty hands, clean mind. I like him. He's not a shark. We have enough sharks." In the limo ride home, the silence was different. It wasn't tense. It was charged. "You did well," Serafina admitted, taking off her heels and rubbing her feet. "They're just people, Serafina," Jack said, loosening his tie. "Rich people, poor people. Everyone just wants to tell you about the things they love. With Arthur, it was cars. With the lady in the red dress, it was her poodle. You just listen. It's not rocket science." "It saved my hide," she whispered. "Arthur is going to vote against the takeover. I saw it in his eyes." "Good," Jack said, looking out the window at the passing city lights. "Does that mean I get a bonus? Don't push your luck, Reynolds." But for the first time she smiled at him. A real smile. And Jack felt a dangerous flicker of something that wasn't part of the contract. Moving into the Sterling penthouse was a culture shock for Jack and Leo. Jack's apartment in Queens was 800 square feet. The penthouse was 8,000. Leo had his own wing. There was a chef, a cleaner, and a household manager named Jeffrey, who looked at Jack's tool belt like it was a live grenade. "Mr. Reynolds," Jeffrey sniffed on the third day, "might I suggest we store your equipment in the basement storage? It is cluttering the foyer." "The tools stay in the den," Jack said, not looking up from the toaster he was fixing. "And tell the chef to stop making foams. Leo wants grilled cheese, real cheese, not aged Gruyere foam." But despite the friction, a rhythm began to form, and the catalyst was the children. Lily and Leo were inseparable. They were two lonely kids who had found a lifeline in each other. They built massive forts out of the expensive silk cushions in the living room. They raced remote-controlled cars down the marble hallways. For Serafina, the change was disorienting. She would come home from a brutal 14-hour day to find the house loud, alive. One Tuesday evening, 3 weeks into their marriage, Serafina walked in to find the living room transformed. The lights were off. A white sheet was draped over 2 chairs. Jack was making shadow puppets on the sheet with a flashlight while Lily and Leo giggled uncontrollably on the floor. And then Jack roared, making a shadow of a wolf. The tickle monster attacked. He dove onto the pile of blankets, tickling both kids until they were screaming with laughter. Serafina stood in the doorway, clutching her briefcase. She felt like an intruder in her own home. She watched the joy on Lily's face, a raw, uninhibited joy she hadn't seen since Lily was a baby. Jack looked up and saw her. He paused out of breath. "Mommy," Lily shouted. "Come play. Jack is the tickle monster." I have to check some emails," Serafina stammered, retreating to her study. Jack followed her a moment later. He found her staring blankly at her computer screen. "You okay?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted, her voice small. "I know how to run a corporation. I don't know how to play." "You don't need a manual, Serafina," Jack said gently. "You just get on the floor. You let go." "I can't let go. If I let go, everything falls apart." "Not here." Jack stepped into the room. "Out there, maybe. But in here, I got you. I'm the structural support. You can rest." He reached out and took the mouse from her hand. His fingers brushed hers. The electricity was undeniable this time. Serafina looked up at him, her eyes wide. He was so different from the men she knew. He was solid. Dinner is in 10 minutes, Jack said, his voice husky. Grilled cheese. Don't be late. He walked away, leaving Serafina with a racing heart. 2 days later, the bubble burst. It was 2:00 a.m. when Serafina's phone rang. It was the emergency line from the factory in New Jersey. Ms. Sterling, you need to get down here. It was the plant manager, frantic. The main weaving line is down. The software is glitching. The machines are overheating. We've ceased production on the fall line. We're losing $50,000 an hour. Serafina was out of bed in seconds. I'm on my way. She ran into the hallway, colliding with Jack, who had come out in his boxers and a t-shirt, hearing the commotion. What's wrong? Factory emergency. Total shutdown. If we miss the shipment deadline for the European launch, the stock will tank. Kincaid will have all the ammo he needs to force a sale. I'm coming, Jack said, turning back to his room. No, Jack. This is technical. It's industrial machinery. I can fix anything with an engine or a gear, Serafina. Give me 5 minutes. They took the helicopter. When they landed on the roof of the massive Sterling textile plant, the situation was chaotic. Alarms were blaring. Steam was venting from the massive automated looms. Engineers were running around with laptops, shouting. It's a cyber attack, the lead engineer yelled. Someone uploaded a virus into the logic controllers. It's scrambling the timing. The needles are smashing into each other. Serafina went pale. Kincaid. He hacked us. Can you override it? She asked. No. The system is locked out. We have to wait for the IT team to rebuild the server. It will take 2 days. We don't have 2 days, Serafina screamed. We have 12 hours. Jack stepped forward. He walked up to the main loom, a beast of a machine the size of a bus. He opened the maintenance panel. He looked at the chaos of belts, gears, and servo motors. If the computer is the problem, Jack shouted over the noise, bypass the computer. You can't, the engineer scoffed. These are fly-by-wire systems. It's a machine, Jack yelled back. It has a mechanical rhythm. If I disconnect the logic controller and hot-wire the servo drivers to a manual timer, I can run it in analog mode. That's impossible, the engineer sneered. Who is this guy? I'm her husband, Jack growled. And I'm telling you, give me a toolkit and get out of my way. Serafina looked at the engineer, then at Jack. Jack's eyes were fierce, focused. He was in his element. Do what he says, Serafina ordered. But Miss Sterling, do it. For the next 6 hours, Serafina watched a masterclass. Jack didn't use a keyboard. He stripped wires. He adjusted tension belts by feel. He used a stopwatch to time the rhythm of the needles. He was covered in grease sweat and industrial lubricant. He barked orders at the engineers who scrambled to obey him. At 8:00 a.m. Jack stood back. Fire it up. The foreman hit the big green button. The machine groaned, then clanked, and then it began to hum. The rhythmic clack, clack, clack of the loom filled the air. Fabric began to spool out perfect, unblemished sterling silk. A cheer went up from the floor. Serafina felt her knees go weak. She walked over to Jack. He was wiping his face with a rag, looking exhausted but triumphant. You did it, she breathed. You saved the company. Just needed a little percussive maintenance. Jack grinned. Adrenaline and relief crashed into her at once. She didn't think. She just reacted. She threw her arms around his neck and kissed him. It wasn't a show kiss for the cameras. It was fierce, grateful, and desperate. Jack froze for a split second, then his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against him. He kissed her back with a hunger that told her he had been wanting to do this for weeks, The factory floor disappeared. The noise faded. It was just the two of them anchored in the storm. When they broke apart, breathless, Serafina's eyes were wide. She touched her lips. "Jack." "Don't," he said, his voice rough. "Don't say it was for the contract." "It wasn't," she whispered. But before they could say anything else, a flashbulb went off. Standing on the catwalk above them, holding a long-lens camera, was a private investigator. And next to him was Harrison Blake, smiling like the devil himself. "Beautiful moment," Harrison called down his voice, echoing in the cavernous room. "Truly touching the mechanic and the millionaire. Tell me, Serafina, does the board know you paid him $1 million to be your stud?" Serafina's blood ran cold. Jack stepped in front of her. "Get out of here, Blake." "Oh, I'm leaving." Harrison laughed, waving a folder in the air. "But I'm taking a copy of the prenup and the bank transfer records with me. See you at the shareholder meeting tomorrow, Serafina. I think it's time for a leadership change." Harrison turned and walked away. Serafina stood amidst the humming machines, the taste of Jack on her lips, and the realization that her life was about to burn to the ground. The silence in the penthouse was louder than the factory alarms had ever been. Jack was packing his duffel bag in the guest room. He didn't slam drawers. He moved with a quiet, lethal precision. Serafina stood in the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself, watching the only man who had ever made her feel safe walk out of her life. "Jack, please," she said, her voice cracking. "I can fix this. I'll transfer the remaining $500,000 tonight. You can take Leo go somewhere safe until the press dies down. Harrison won't come after you. He wants me." Jack stopped packing. He turned slowly, holding a T-shirt in his hand. The look in his eyes broke her heart. It wasn't anger. It was disappointment. "You still don't get it, do you?" Jack asked quietly. "Get what I'm trying to protect you?" "You think everything is a transaction," Jack said, tossing the shirt into the bag. "You think because you bought a fiancé, you bought a man. That kiss at the factory, was that part of the contract?" "Serafina. Was that billable hours?" "No." Serafina stepped forward, tears stinging her eyes. "That was real. That was the most real thing I've felt in 10 years. Then why are you trying to pay me off to leave?" Jack zipped the bag shut. "I didn't sign up for the money, Serafina. I signed up because you looked at my son like he mattered, because my kid and your kid needed us. I fell for you. God help me. I actually fell for the Ice Queen." He walked past her. "Jack, wait." "I'm going back to the garage," he said, not looking back. "Leo is already in the truck. Good luck with your board meeting, Serafina. I hope the company keeps you warm at night." The door clicked shut. Serafina Sterling slid down the wall to the floor and wept. The boardroom the next morning was a shark tank. Serafina walked in, wearing a black suit sharp enough to cut glass. She sat at the head of the table. To her right sat Arthur Sterling, looking grim. To her left, an empty chair, where her fiancé should have been. And standing at the front, projecting a PowerPoint presentation titled Leadership Crisis, was Harrison Blake. "The evidence is irrefutable," Harrison crowed, pointing to a slide showing the bank transfer of $500,000 to Reynolds Auto and Repair. Serafina Sterling engaged in fraud. She hired a common laborer to deceive this board, to deceive the shareholders, and to manipulate the stock price. She is unstable. She is desperate. And she is liable. The board members murmured angrily. Walter Thorne looked at his hands, unable to meet Serafina's eyes. "I move for an immediate vote of no confidence," Harrison said, smiling like a jackal. "And I nominate myself as interim CEO to oversee the sale to Kincaid Corp." "Seconded," said a man from Kincaid's pocket. Wait. Serafina stood up. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. Yes, I hired him. I was desperate to save this company from vultures like you, Harrison. But what you call a common laborer is the only reason our New Jersey plant is running today. Jack Reynolds saved the European shipment. He did more for this company in 6 hours than you have done in 6 years. Touching, Harrison sneered. But irrelevant. He's a paid actor, a fraud. And where is he now, running with the cash, I assume? He's not here, Serafina said, her voice dropping, because he has more integrity than anyone in this room. He's not here, a gravelly voice boomed from the back of the room. Because finding a parking spot in Midtown is a nightmare. The double doors swung open. Jack Reynolds walked in. He wasn't wearing the tuxedo. He wasn't wearing the jumpsuit. He was wearing a simple button-down shirt and jeans, holding a small, crumpled piece of paper. He walked straight past Harrison Blake, ignoring him entirely, and stood next to Serafina. He took her hand. He squeezed it. Mr. Reynolds. Harrison laughed nervously. Coming to ask for the rest of your payout. Jack looked at the board. He held up the crumpled paper. It was the check Serafina had written him. This is the second installment, Jack said. He ripped it in half. Then he ripped it again. He let the confetti fall onto the mahogany table. And I returned the first installment this morning. Wire transfer. Check your accounts. The room went dead silent. Serafina stared at him, shock radiating through her. He gave it back. All of it. I'm not here for the money, Jack said, his voice ringing with authority. I'm here because I love Serafina Sterling. And I'm here because she is the best damn CEO you people will ever find. She fights for this company. She bleeds for it. He turned to Harrison. You want to talk about fraud? Let's talk about the virus in the New Jersey plant. I found the code signature in the logic controller. It wasn't a random hacker. It was a localized upload. Jack pulled a USB drive from his pocket and tossed it to Arthur Sterling. The upload came from an IP address registered to a private yacht, Jack said. The Lady Luck. That's your boat, isn't it? Harrison. Harrison's face drained of color. That's preposterous. You're a mechanic. You don't know anything about coding. I know how to trace a line to a leak, Jack said coldly. And you're leaking, Harrison. Arthur Sterling picked up the USB drive. He looked at Harrison with eyes like flint. Is this true, Harrison? It's a lie. He's lying, Harrison stammered. I had my security team verify Mr. Reynolds' findings this morning, Arthur said calmly. Jack called me at 6 a.m. Serafina looked at Jack. He had been working the whole time. Even when he left her, he was saving her. Arthur stood up. He looked at the board. We have a motion on the floor to remove Harrison Blake from the board immediately for corporate espionage and to affirm Serafina Sterling as CEO. All in favor. Every hand went up. Harrison Blake was escorted out by security, shouting threats that no one listened to. When the doors closed, the room was quiet. Serafina looked at Jack. She didn't care about the board members watching. She didn't care about decorum. You gave the money back, she whispered. Jack, the garage. You'll lose it. I don't care about the building, Sarah, Jack said, brushing a tear from her cheek. It's just brick and mortar. Home is where the people you love are. I can fix cars anywhere. I can't fix my heart if I lose you. Ahem. Arthur Sterling cleared his throat. They broke apart, realizing they were still in a board meeting. Regarding the garage, Arthur said, shuffling some papers. I actually bought the note from the bank yesterday. Jack stiffened. You what? I bought the mortgage, Arthur grunted. Consider it a signing bonus. We need a new chief technical officer. Someone who actually understands how machines work. The position pays significantly more than a mechanic's wage, and it comes with a full medical plan for Leo. Arthur looked at Serafina. If that is acceptable to the CEO. Serafina smiled, a radiant, genuine smile that lit up the entire room. I think he's overqualified, Uncle Arthur, but we'll take him. The sign above the old brick building in Queens had changed. It no longer said Reynolds Auto and Repair. It now read Sterling and Reynolds Classic Restoration. Inside the shop was bustling, but it wasn't the chaotic grit of before. It was pristine. 3 mechanics were working on a line of vintage Jaguars and Mustangs. In the back office, Lily and Leo were arguing over a blueprint. The spaceship needs a turbo button, Leo insisted. Yo. No, it needs a unicorn horn for aerodynamics, Lily countered. Serafina walked in, carrying 2 coffees. She wasn't wearing a Chanel suit. She was wearing designer jeans and a leather jacket. She looked 5 years younger. She walked out to the bay, where Jack was tuning the engine of the 1967 Shelby GT 500, Arthur's car. Hey, Grease Monkey, she called out. Jack stood up, wiping his hands. He looked happy. Hey, boss lady, how's the empire? Thriving. Stock is up 20 points, she said, handing him a coffee. But I left early. Oh yeah, why? Because my husband promised to take me and the kids fishing. Serafina grinned. And he promised to teach me how to put a worm on a hook. I did say that. Jack laughed, pulling her in for a kiss. He didn't care that his hands were dirty. She didn't care either. Lily, Serafina called out. Leo, pack up. We're going. As the 4 of them piled into the fully restored Ford F-150 Buster, the dog hopped into the truck bed, barking at the wind. Serafina Sterling had spent her whole life building a fortune. But as she looked at the man driving the truck and the 2 children laughing in the back seat, she knew the truth. She hadn't been a millionaire until the day she broke down in front of that garage. And that is the story of Serafina and Jack. In a world obsessed with net worth, they found something that can't be audited self-worth and the courage to choose love over image. Serafina thought she was saving Jack, but in the end, the mechanic fixed the one thing the CEO couldn't her broken heart. What would you have done in Serafina's shoes? Would you have trusted a stranger with your child's future? And do you think money can ever truly buy happiness, or just a more comfortable kind of misery? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story that moves you. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.